All right, we're live. We're live. Okay. All right, welcome everybody. Satya here. One second. Okay. Hello. Okay, if you're joining live, welcome. Let me know where you're joining from. How are you feeling today on this beautiful Thursday? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Sending you so much love, so much love. Let's take a breath and arrive if you're going to stay. Japan. Oh my God, hello. So much love. All right. So, for those of you who are joining live and you see me looking at two different screens, it's because I am both on YouTube and Instagram. So I'm going to be looking at both screens. YouTube is a growing community. So there's more people here on Instagram, but I do post the entire live broadcast on my YouTube channel for those of you who cannot stay for the entire transmission. And yeah, you can go ahead and tune into it later if you choose to do so, or you stay. The invite here is to ask questions and participate if there's anything that you want to know more about the topic that I'm about to speak. And I will try my best to respond to them. So, all right. Someone's asking, have you been in Atitlan Lake? No, I have not. I am planting a seed. Maybe I would do that in the near future. Who knows? I know it's really magical. I know there's like a lot of heart frequency and cacao medicine and all the beauty that's unfolding in that realm. A lot of medicine, a lot of ancient technology. So yeah. But yeah, I'll start by introducing myself. I saw your question. I start by introducing myself. I'm Satya Lights. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. I'm an embodiment mentor. I'm trauma informed. I'm a poet, writer, entrepreneur. I do many things, just like all of us in this day and age. We're the Renaissance people here, right? Being and exploring our multidimensionality. So I'm right there with you doing it. So someone's asking where I'm originally from. I'm originally from Turkey, guys. I am Turkish American. I am currently in the state of New York, upstate New York. And I have spent majority of my life half in Turkey and half in Los Angeles, California. Now I'm like on the move, following the excitement and the inspiration. So this is a little bit about me. So I am using many different lenses and tools and modalities in my work. So whatever it is that I'm sharing, I'm really considering all these like lenses and looking from different perspectives. So just keep that in mind. And today I choose the topic, who's choosing your relationships? Is it you or your inner child? You may already know the answer. But I want to speak into it a little bit because I think inner child work is super important. And yeah, it's one of my favorite things to do, to dig deep and do some deep healing. And if you are here in this space, I assume you're on that journey of exploration of your psyche, of your internal realm. and you may be just getting started, you maybe already have been doing the work, all of that. So I am seeing someone trying to request to be in the live video. So this is not one of those videos that we're doing a, like a guest and talk back and forth kind of things. I'm going to be talking, so I'm not going to accept your request, just so you know. So I'm not, just it's nothing personal. Don't take it personal. I'm not going to accept it. Anyway, so who's choosing our relationships, our inner child? So I want to speak into the concept of inner child a little bit, because there's different facets of the inner child. When we speak about inner child, majority of the understanding is the wonder child, like it's the fun, the creative, and like that part. Although that is also part of our inner child experience, there's also the psychologically, emotionally wounded parts of us, fragmented parts of us, um, considered as inner child, and it just like includes all of it. And one of my teachers, I'll tell you his name, I never met him in real life. Okay, I forgot his name. I'll remember. So he talks about the wounded child, and as we heal and as we reclaim, as we come into a whole new relationship, we actually touch into the wonder child. So, like when I'm talking about the inner child today, just a disclaimer: I'm going to be talking about the aspects of us that are in deep in our psyche, that are wounded, that are unhealed parts of us. So someone's still sending me a video request. It's just, I'm gonna actually, you know what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna try to, because hold on, anyway, I don't know how to do that. I'll just let it go. So, when I'm talking about the inner child, I'm talking about this unhealed, wounded parts of us in the context of today's conversation. So, just keep that in mind. Yet, it does wraps itself around, and like in the opening of it, we do touch into the wonder child portion of it, right? So, the question that I ask, who's choosing our relationships? Are we, like, are you choosing it with your adult self, or is your wound, or is your inner child is choosing? The answer is your inner child is choosing your relationships. And when I say relationships, I'm talking about anything that we're in relation to. Yet it does show itself very intimately, and we can actually explore this in our intimate romantic partnerships. Yet anyone that we're in relationship with, we do like find ourselves in like perfect match to actually reenact and hopefully resolve our traumas. So I took a little bit of notes that I want to cover here. So we talked about the concept of the inner child and what context I'm going to be using this word. And, when we are talking about inner child, we are talking about shadow work. And inner child is usually the aspects of us, really, like the unhealed expressions of our ego. And ultimately, what it does and what it wants to heal and resolve. So even if you consciously don't know that this wants to happen, and it is uncomfortable, especially when the trigger happens, which we're going to talk into it, um, even though you may not consciously want those like triggers and your heart desires is like beautiful flowy relationships that are everybody's like supporting each other, like you just hit those like triggers, and there's a reason for that. And like we literally like perfectly attract those who will perfectly hit our unhealed parts. So you know, um, the reason for it, and there's the entire cosmic plan that we can talk about, but I'm not going to go into the meta of the things. I'm going to stay in the psychological and emotional human parts of it. And, um, like the energetics, so think about the psychological and the emotional wounds that you may be carrying from your childhood. And like I'm going to go into like there is everybody, like we are raised by our families, and ultimately nobody meant any harm. Everybody is constantly doing the best they can with the information they have, right? Like in any given moment. And we receive so much love from our like family and primary caregivers, yet because of their unhealed traumas and unheard, unseen, parented versions that live inside of them, like we are also being fragmented by those experiences, and we're majority of us are you know neglect, like experience neglect, and like emotionally turbulent families, right? Like emotionally turbulent experiences, because ultimately like as humanity, like our relationship to our emotions are kind of challenging. Like it's like we don't know how to be in it, and that's part of the learning process, right? Like that's how we perfectly I said I didn't want to go into the meta, but how we perfectly choose our families is so that like it's a soul evolutionary process. We are wounded perfectly, like we are perfectly traumatized, so that we can learn whatever it is that we are here to learn and resolve and embody and like expand into that, right? So um the inner child is, because it's like in the deep in our psyche, really most of the time buried, yet like if we know how to pay attention, um and you may have done any like therapy or some shadow work on yourself, and you may already know these things. It's the part that is actually calling for certain experiences to resolve the experience, because ultimately what our soul is calling us forward is healing and expansion. And how do we resolve our traumas if we are not actually aware of them? It's through relationships and the mirroring that gets to happen within those relationships. And like I love the fact that like, and this may be also even challenging to even hear, like how do we reframe our triggers? How do we work with our triggers? Because yes, we do attract these experiences, challenging experiences, to actually remember, reenact, and resolve these experiences. And within the moment of when the trigger happens, when the rapture happens, and like you're in that dysregulated state, or you may be remembering certain things and you don't have any tools and you're reacting, ultimately you're also harboring a lot of love, like for these relationships, right? So ultimately you don't want to hurt the person also. So how do we use these triggers? So also like we are fully showing up for our beloveds, like fully showing up like for our family. Yes, like like we are in this game of like mirroring each other, our wounds, like learning from each other, like through each other about ourselves, deeper wounds. How do we like stay in that game and consciously and compassionately choose to do this deeper work, because no matter what happens, this is going to come up to surface. And if you're not taking responsibility, or if you're not getting the cues to actually look at those parts of us and choose, like, and also there's a whole attachment styles and everything, and like how we respond and react, like, but I'm not going to go into those teachings here yet. Ultimately, the idea is to reframe and also consciously and compassionately choose and stay in the game. Because if we leave, let's say, right, and because of lack of taking responsibility, personal responsibility, and I'm not saying I'm not talking about staying in any toxic environment in the name of love, because there's also the act of, there's the whole teaching of the trauma bond. And I feel like anything from this perspective, any relationship is like we're like attracting these people into our lives, like any relationship, through our traumas, through the energetics that lie in our frequential field, so that we can get to cues and resolve. And then now, like, there's another, and there's like layers to it. So if you're not taking responsibility, and every time something gets challenging, if we are, running away from these opportunities to heal, ultimately this is going to continue happening in different relationships. So, for those of you who may be wondering, like, I broke up with my partner and now I'm in a whole new relationship and I'm continuously having the same type of problems and triggers. This is the reason, because ultimately it's never about the other person. It's all about the triggers that are happening here inside of us. So, depending on the, like the quality of the relationship, I'm not, again, not talking about the toxic relationships and staying in them, which, it's like part of the karma also. We do get addicted to those energetics and stay in it. And that was my experience with, like, with a deep, 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 like really challenging trauma bond that like, it took me several years to recover from that and heal from that, which, ultimately, in retrospect, looking at it, I'm like so grateful for those very challenging experiences, so that I can actually be the woman that I am today. So that, like, it really invited me to go even deeper in my healing journey, because it really showed me where, because ultimately, like, those relationships are taught, like, not like those are the symptoms. They're like bringing like similar energetics, familiar energetics, so that we can actually remember what we don't remember from our even further past experiences. So, going back to my notes, um, we are constantly choosing the familiar experiences that we said, right? Like the familiar experiences, so that we feel comfortable enough to get even triggered. I'll say that. We feel comfortable enough to drop our, like, guard and get triggered by the other person. So, like, it's perfectly, like, when you think about the geometry of it all, it's so perfectly designed. But it always comes back down to taking responsibility. So ultimately, when we talk about the inner child, what we're talking about is unmet needs, the parts of us that were not heard, the parts of us that were not seen, the parts of us that were not understood, held, loved. And those parts of us ultimately are not trying by like attracting like relationships that are triggering us. They're not trying to hurt us. They're not trying to ultimately hurt us. They are trying to resolve like what they're trying to be seen and heard. And then along the way, those very parts can also become the protective parts because they are so hurt. One of the experiences like recently I had, which I even wrote a poem about it, maybe I get to read it to you, very short. It was a beautiful, beautiful realization, which um, there are realizations that happen in the field of the mind, and then there are realizations that happen in the field of the body, which is visceral, and it finally lands. And then it finally, like when it lands, that is the part where like inner child actually drops the guard. And if we do that work of like reparenting and actually seeing and validating these parts, like experiences that has happened in the past, if we do it enough, if you do it enough, because ultimately, until we take our last breath, these inner childs and these parts of us will be with us, right? So instead of like doing the very thing that they did not receive, which is not being seen, not being heard, and doing the very thing that they didn't receive and not giving them, they want to be heard. And if you're actually not paying attention, what you're doing is this very same thing you needed and you didn't get, and you're doing the same thing to yourself, which is the joke, like the ultimate joke. Like we're fearing about abandonment, let's say, right? Like we're feeling about the abandonment all the while what we do is abandoning ourselves every day, all day long. So self-abdication is like, like one of the biggest problems that we're all facing. We forget these parts. We are so busy to make it happen or create stories and build different, like through the stories that even we created in the past to stay safe. And if we're constantly living from those lands, we're forgetting what has been, like happening inside of us underneath it all. That's why there's a whole concept of acting out, and also the concept of acting in. Acting out is the inner child is wanting attention. The energy is going outward, creating like, okay, hear me. Like that's the part that reacts. All the while, like your conscious adult self, it's like, I don't know why I actually did that. Because it was not your adult self who was conscious. It is your, like part of you that has not received the love, the validation, or, like that wants to be heard, whatever the circumstances in that moment. So the acting out, it happens like within the relationship, you act out and you create all this drama, or like you are having an outward experience through the wound that has not been addressed. So that's acting out. And what is acting in? Acting in is, I just talked about it, is doing the very thing that you have been done to yourself. And ultimately, we all do both of them, right? We are acting out and we're acting in. We're being, like we're the one who are judging ourselves and, like doing everything, like abandoning ourselves, like, yeah, like we are abandoned, and we're the one who are neglecting ourselves, because we were neglected, right? So, because that's the actual way of like how ultimately how love translates to us in our childhood, right? Like, so So I'm gonna stop for a second. Um, I think your name is Yolanda. Yolanda and all the other people who are requesting to be on this live. This is not a live that we're having a conversation. So it's just also, just I want to just like stay present instead of seeing all this like popping up on my end. So I would really appreciate if you cancel your request because I am not going to accept it. I'm not rejecting you. It's just not the context of this live broadcasts. So I'm not rejecting your inner child. Don't take it personal. Anyway, so why we connect to the people who match the energy of our wounds, we answered this because ultimately it's almost like how I see it and how like it's almost like the puzzle piece, right? So let's say your fear of abandonment is the undercurrent frequency that you're operating with, and then you end up attracting someone. Maybe you have a beautiful sweet love and you're like vibing together, you're in a relationship, but ultimately there may be a circumstance that they are constantly triggering, even though they are not leaving you because of your attachment style or your fears. Like whatever they do is like experiencing and activating that abandonment wound, and you're choosing that subconsciously. And I mean, if you guys have any interest in reading any like attachment theories, these are like so wonderful ways to really understand about our internal world. One of the books that I love, I mean, there's many, but it's called Attached. So if you want to get like good amount of information about your attachment wound and how you're relating to people and connecting to people, that's a really good book to resource yourself with. So through those attachment wounds, we find those people who are matching that. And there are different perspectives. There's also a perspective from the school of thought that I'm coming, which is a Cappuccinian therapy method that I have studied for years. So it's like, like it's almost like this match happens, and like we love the qualities, and then at the end of because they are familiar, but also we are also because there's not fully safety within us, like if we're not like safely attaching, like the very qualities that we also love, subconsciously we are just like resisting, if it makes sense. And how do we, so this brings me back to the question, so how do we like use these triggers as a like just like really following back down, what is it, and also how can I actually set an intention to really tend to my inner child from a place of fully responsible, like full responsibility. And the whole term you may have heard, like reparenting. Basically, what we're doing, we're becoming the father and the mother to that child. Not that you didn't have father and mother or a parent, like a parent figure, but you ultimately ended up not getting your needs met. And how can you meet your own needs and create a whole new relationship? And through this kind of work, through this like creating safety and meeting your needs, ultimately what happens is you're actually bringing your different, like let's say anxious attachment, like your attachments into safe. So you're starting to, because you are like relating to yourself from a place of safety through the work that you're doing. Now in your relationships, you're safely attaching because you are meeting your own needs. If something comes up, like you have a certain level of understanding of self and the wounds that are actually creating certain experiences. Does it make sense? I want to bring in First of all, just go ahead and start typing and like, just interacting with me, so I know this what I'm talking about making sense. And then one of the things that I want to bring in when it comes to inner child work is this unconditionality, this compassion, this nurturing energy, and gentleness, like really embracing, because that's ultimately what we're needing, right? That is the actual energy that parts of us are demanding almost, which is a big word. Those parts of us demanding. So, and when we give that to ourselves and claim those parts of us and tend to those parts of us, the acting out and the acting in is going to release its grips on us. No, and you can go look back in all the relationships you had in your life, and then you can go and look at the common threads. This is one of the ways that you can actually, oh, like this is the way that I am showing up, or this is the way that I'm acting out. This is the way that I'm acting in. Which parts? I see someone says, say that again. I don't know which part. So the part that I remember is the actual bringing the looking backwards to all our relationships to see the common thread and how did we act out. Like, even though if you're not in a relationship, or if you don't have a good mirror to show you where you're at in this moment, you can still continue healing. You don't really need to be in a current, like, now moment relationship in order to heal your inner child, of course, right? Like, so you can reference your past relationships and pull the information and continue cultivating that safety in your nervous system ultimately. So, and being really brutally honest with ourselves. And you know I have been in this line of work and doing my own work, like it's more than like a decade and a half now. And one of the most important, and I know you heard this before, but it will never hurt to really repeat it, because ultimately what we need is self honesty, like really brutally honest with ourselves. Second one is responsibility, like I was like taking responsibility, all the while being really compassionate with yourself, not from a place of oh my god, this is what I'm experiencing. Or even like, if we are like, majority of like our society is a shame based society, right? Like we are, in the toxic shame. I'm not talking about the healthy shame. The toxic shame, because we don't know how to be with the toxic shame, we project it. And then because we were projected even from our childhood, what's happening is we are actually doing that on ourselves as well. So that's, here we are, another example of acting in. So, like, really, really, really compassionately and like nurturing, okay, like, come here, like, I see you, I see your pain. When we talk about a child, I really highly, like, that's the biggest invitation here. How would you ask yourself always this question? How would you, like, if there was a little girl or a little boy with you, how would you talk to that boy and girl? How would you tend to them if they were going through a very challenging emotional experience? And be that for yourself. Be that for yourself, that nurturing presence. And really, it also really supports us. I go deep into these topics in my course, Behavioral Medicine, but also like I really would love to bring like really practical ways for you to work with it, even if you're not like being a part of the course. It's like, okay, how do I? So, what is reparenting? Being the mother and the father for yourself, right? Like, how can you define and redefine those energies? And this can be a meditation of like, okay, like, what is the motherly energy that like this version of me is craving? What is the fatherly energy, which is sometimes like really reteaching and setting boundaries to yourself, right? Like, or, oh no, this is a no, like you don't do this, like kind of like being also firm. It's not only always about this, like, yeah, you're always right, but like, if you're creating this whole giant drama, there are ways in which also you're teaching yourself boundaries, because ultimately it is going back in time and raising yourself. The ultimate, like we're all like raising ourselves, and really bringing that energy of like, okay, what did I need and I didn't receive? How can I be that for myself? From a place of really open heart, firm boundaries, and seeing yourself, hearing yourself, because ultimately, you want to be heard. But no one's going to hear you if you're not actually hearing yourself. Because what you're going to create, let's go back to us, right? Like here we are, circle, like square one. You're going to create experiences who are not going to hear you, people who are not going to pay attention to you. Because why? Because you're not, paying attention to yourself. There's one thing like I remember writing, it's like no one can abandon you if you're not abandoning yourself. No one can abandon you if you're not abandoning yourself. But does that like information live in your body? Like does your inner child know that? And this is not like, oh, like going and speaking to your inner child only once. And in many, many, many circumstances that I know this from my private practice, the inner child work is not like, oh, let's start the inner child work, especially for those of you, if you have not done any kind of work or shadow work, it doesn't come out like immediately, especially if there are trust issues, if there's like deep, deep, deep like deep, like complex traumas. First, like you gotta say, like show up for it. They gotta trust you, especially if they're abandoned and like left behind all these years. And now, like you're 30 something, and then you're like, hey, I love you. It's like, where were you all this time? I'm not gonna trust you. What if you leave me again? See? So it's like really cultivating that relationship. And through that cultivation of that relationship, your outside relationships will always going to mirror this. And really using any trigger as an opportunity to really heal and also show up for yourself and for your beloveds. If there's like a really, foundationally beautiful relationship, it's like, okay, this is really understanding, this is my wound, and I reacted from that space. I'm taking responsibility, I'm taking care of her, him right now. And from this place, let's like, while I'm still tender, can I John Bradshaw was the person that I was talking about. I love, like I've studied really, really deeply of his work, and his work reflects into the way in which that I do my inner child work with people, along with different, like studies, of course. So yes, so like really having that conversations with our beloveds. Yes, like I reacted. Now I'm like tending to her. It is a little vulnerable. Can you work with me? So how can I actually show up for you next time? And also know that this is one of my wounds. So let's like let's pay attention. Like consciously learning to relate, because ultimately, like what is a conscious relate in conscious relationships? That means we are both aware that we are work in progress and we are healing. And I would love to know about your traumas and your deepest wounds, so I actually show up in accordance to that. And here, these are my wounds. I'll tell you, and vulnerably drop all the, like the walls that I built. Let's work together and grow together. This is a conscious relating, right? This is the spiritual work. The ultimate spiritual work is like this divine partnership, this kind of relationships. And it doesn't necessarily mean that this has to end like forever. It's like we walk each other home from A to B, when like every relationship has its own time frame, which even a second is an infinity. So it doesn't matter, like everything, if we learn to actually receive all these things as gifts and opportunities to heal and show up and like come into wholeness, come home to ourselves, and show up in the world at who we are, like as who we're supposed to be, using these experiences. And as we do this kind of deep work, it actually affects and ripples into every single relationship that we have. This inner child, these like fragments that are stuck in time, in wounds, and when we address them, when we are like we have the courage to be with them, because there's also all the entire unprocessed emotional content that gets to be processed, right? So going back to the nervous system work, how can we titrate? We don't have to do it all at the same time. We can titrate, we can teach that to ourselves, our bodies, safety, bit by bit. And yes, bringing the fragments of the psyche of our parts that has left along the way, that soul retrieval, like like healing the inner child homecoming, yet at the same time releasing the stress responses that are living in our nervous system, that are living in our bodies. This like a holistic healing. And we cannot really address like full, like sustainable healing that actually happens without addressing the states of the nervous system, without addressing the shadows, without addressing the inner child. So these are all like perspectives that we work with. And as we learn about these perspectives, especially within the relationship, if you're in a relationship and if you're, like in a conscious, like the both sides, you get to learn these things together and do these things together. What a beautiful way to actually expand, right? What a beautiful way to actually expand in love. Yes, like we are all carrying fragmented parts. We're all carrying wounds. But are we going to be the victims of it? Are we going to continue doing the things that has happened, that we experience? Like, are we going to be uh, the the villains of our own experience, or are we going to actually choose and show up? And when there's the inner child in the field, which I think that this is a general saying of like this is always the case, but especially when there's healing inner child in the picture, in the awareness. Again, I'm going to repeat: gentleness, compassionate, like presence, um, tenderness, unconditional love, presence, because ultimately what they didn't receive is presence, loving presence. Can you be that loving presence and just hear. You don't even have to say anything sometimes. How do you know? So, Kristen, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that question. I think you're asking in the context of the question that we are like responding. So, I actually spoke into like the context of inner child that I am speaking into. So ultimately, so what I said, the inner child, it can be the wonder child, like the most expressive parts of us who are like curious and playful, yes. And there's the wounded, unattended parts of us. So I was speaking into the wounded, unattended parts of us. Yet ultimately, you're asking, how do we know if it's our inner child or our higher self? Your higher self is never separate from you. It's always your higher self, because it is always working for the highest good. We are choosing to be in certain like unhealthy relationships. Why? Because ultimately we are creating an opportunity to heal. It's always the higher self. Like, from where I'm looking, you may or may not agree, and we can I this is where I'm looking from in this moment. Yeah, does it make sense? It's always the higher self if you're actually working with it, if you're actually really present with it, because we're constantly being invited to resolve the energies that we're carrying, because like ultimately the consciousness wants to expand, right? How do we expand if we're still in contractions in certain parts? So the higher self is bringing the, like the perfect match to this contraction, to this trauma, so that we can hit each other and get triggered, act out, act in, and have this experience and hopefully resolve with the right tools, and then hopefully actually release that trauma, resolving the trauma that is living in the body through these experiences. So use every single relationship in your current reality right now as a sacred tool to your evolutionary process. Everything is sacred, not that like nothing that like, but like see it. This is like an intentional invite as a sacred tool to show you where your wounds are. And from that place, how can we expand? How do we take responsibility? Because we can, like only do this work with responsibility. I think I'm complete with the topic. I'm going to check my notes. Mhm. Yeah, I covered all the notes that I took. I'm going to look at the questions now. Someone says, how do you deal with the low feelings that come with releasing someone after the lesson has been shown to you? Dealing with the low feelings. So, first of all, feelings are like, what you're experiencing in the body. Emotions are like what are causing the feelings. And emotions are meant to be felt. These are meant to be felt. And the answer, like the short answer to what you just asked, is to actually allowing yourself to go through that grieving process. And one thing to know about the grieving process, it has its own agenda, it has its own like life. So, and it is like it comes in waves, and and it does also include so many different different experiences. So allowing yourself to go through the motions and the waves of those grief, grief waves, right? Really feeling them. And also, another thing to really being careful about when it comes to this like specific question that you have asked is, okay, what are the stories that I'm telling myself? Because it is very possible, it is very like human to actually get stuck in the story, and every story is like connected to a certain emotion. So if you're constantly saying the same story, you're looping in the same, like, the thought and emotion and thought, like, cycle, right? So it is important to, yes, feeling it, but also cultivating tools to actually change the story. I don't know if this is actually like measured, but there's this information that I want to share. The emotion, if you give it 90 seconds, any emotion moves. And I know you heard emotion, energy, and motion, right? Like, I know you heard this. So emotion is supposed to move. And if you're allowing yourself to feel without coping with anything, and if you have the capacity in that nervous system in that moment to feel, it moves. But what creates the emotion, in that, like you're creating a state basically by actually staying in the storyline, and then you're looping. So my recommendation to you would be, like, really seeing, like, where am I telling the story, where is the grief, and then, like, the grief may take uh years to really resolve. But within the context of healing your heart, are you also taking action to actually address the parts of you who created that experience in the first place? So that would be my invite to you, to address the inner child, address the traumas, address the unresolved things inside of you. So, like, you're proactively healing and proactively feeling and creating resolution within the moment of the healing. So while you're feeling, you are actually creating a certain level of safety, so that you're not really recreating that kind of relationship. So that may be my answer. Kristen, I couldn't process my father's death. I had a breakdown 6 months later because I had no tools. First of all, sending you blessings. And one of the biggest initiations of humans is like losing like experiencing the death of our parents, right? So, feeling you, Kristen. And so majority of us, like, we like, when it comes to death, which is like this topic that nobody talks about, right? Like, in that grief, that if we don't have any tools, even if we have tools, like, that breaks us down, first of all. And that breakdown is actually a part of the gift. And we don't see it in that, like, moment, right? Like, we don't see it. And honestly, that grief may actually never fully, like, go away, especially when it comes to our loved ones, right? Like that grief. Who there is the rain, the book that is a very famous book, I forgot the name. The smell of rain, the smell of rain something. I'm gonna research it. So it talks about grief being the other side of this, like, massive love, right? So, and like, for our, like, caregivers and parents, like, that love is always going to be on the other side, especially now that they're not there, like, in the physical form. That may always be this, like, feeling that is here sitting, part of the experience. But yes, so, like, I see in my own family and a lot of people, like, that kind of grief is actually, like, not a lot of people have tools for. And it is very important, like, to work with that, because ultimately it turns, like, that kind of heavy energy, like, if you're not really moving through it, stays in the lungs ultimately, and then, like, wherever the weak part is, turns into a disease. So thank you so much for bringing that, Kristen, and sending you love. Yeah. All right, let's see. Thank you, Denny. Thank you so much, guys, for your beautiful comments. Thank you, thank you. Like before, thank you so much. So for those of you who are, so I am posting these. I am posting these reels. I mean, the entire live broadcast on my YouTube channel, and I am inviting you guys to come join the YouTube after the month of May, which I'm going to be showing up a majority of May. Next weekend, I'm not going to be live because I'm going on a retreat. Okay. Totally energetic opposite puzzle pieces to rematch your unconscious needs looking to be resolved and doing the work. As an adult, meet much of them on our own. Yeah, that's true. That's exactly what I hear you. That makes sense. I'm glad it makes sense. You know. Amazing. So, anyway, I think that's it. I think that's pretty much it. Hello, Yolanda. My husband passed away. Now I was in a twin flame relationship, I thought, but he was also unfortunately karmic. So I don't have the full comprehension of the twin flame experience. That's to me like too cosmic to like to break down. I believe every relationship, I understand where you're coming from when you say karmic, like that karmic like trauma bonds that brought, like we are closing the circles in the realms, right? Like I get that. And but ultimately we're here like experiencing and constantly experiencing what we're here to experience. So doesn't it make it all karmic? It's a question, it's not a statement. Yeah, amazing. So that's pretty much it, guys. Like I'm gonna reiterate the most important part, which is bringing real unconditionality to your inner child, nurturing gentleness, like that softness, and also the boundary, and like really firm um, energetics, and ultimately knowing every single person is doing the best they can with the information they have. But like, what are we choosing? What How do we take responsibility for our side? So that's the most important part. For those of you, I have a few announcements. For those of you who are interested in doing this kind of work, deep work, and really healing from the nervous system level, and addressing the shadow, addressing the inner child, and cultivating tools and ways in which to support yourself and yourself for life, really, because these are life tools and they don't teach it at school when we're growing up. So if you're interested in learning these kind of life tools to support yourself with and learn where you're energetically at, mapping your nervous system, mapping the energetics that are happening in your body, and use tools accordingly, the course that I released recently, Be Your Own Medicine, is specifically designed for this. It's a really holistic, different perspective, like combining different perspectives of this inner work. It's like a really ultimate toolkit. And also it's like a living transmission. The more like, a content that I create relating to that, like it will be expanding. So these are like really micro tools to really use day in, day out, because life is happening in the moment. And when we know like ourselves energetically, when we're present with ourselves, we know what tools to use, how to navigate our life from a place of like really presence, instead of acting out like we're like really creating this like safety within us and operating from that space and being the light for anybody we come in contact with. This doesn't mean that once we do our healing we're not getting triggered again, or like we're not work in progress. This is definitely not that yet. Really learning ourselves. Know thyself on the nervous system level, know thyself, like all your shadows and all the like content that is coming into awareness at any given moment. So that's one of the ways in which that you can actually learn this kind of work from me. The links are, if you're on YouTube, the links are over there somewhere underneath. And if you're on my Instagram, it's on my bio. It's Be Your Own Medicine. The pre-sale ended, but we are still operating from we're still operating from uh, I'm reading the comment. We're still operating from the level 1 pricing, so it's still discounted. If you're interested, at the end of the month, where the price will going to go up again. So if you know you're interested, I would highly suggest that you do that before the price goes up. So that's that. And yesterday we talked about it. This weekend in the portal, my monthly membership, we're going to be doing the mind renovation. We're going to be clearing some belief systems that are blocking us, that are actually not in alignment with our like trajectory that we're moving towards. So belief system activation and change, like clearing mind renovation, I'm calling it. So if you're interested in doing that live with us in the portal, it's happening this Saturday. It's monthly, and you don't have to commit for more than 1 month. If you don't want, you can come and check it out and join the live broadcast. And we do that every month with different topics, different pre-recorded practices, meditations, and you have the entire year and a half of like the live broadcast and the master classes that you have access from me. And then I do offer private work if you're actually ready to have a mirror as me and ready to do that kind of work. I do offer Mirrorship mentorships. With this is like more deep healing and like really healing the nervous system together. And then the visioneership, so that's for those of you who are solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, who are actually on this path of entrepreneurship as a spiritual practice, because we are not separate from our business. And as we grow, our businesses grow. As we grow, like our impact grows. And I love doing that work. I love bringing that work. And I love combining my business and entrepreneurship background, which, like that has been my past life. So now like everything's integrating in this work of like really spiritual, soul-based entrepreneurship. So if you're interested in doing that kind of work with me, that's also available, because really knowing that the business can only grow as much as the person who is running it, right? So that is the baseline that we're working with. And really a new, like it's like a not the business that we have been taught, but like how do we actually drop into our bodies and actually use our bodies as the information, and expanding and opening space and capacity, so that we can, instead of forcing anything to create, we're creating capacity so we can hold, so it automatically comes and we expand in our businesses, in our finances, whatever it is that we're creating. So yeah, that's all the ways that you can work with me. And if you need more information, you can just DM me, and talk to me and ask me questions. And when you apply to work with me, I interview you. And then, like if you're interested, you can also interview me to see if I am the good mentor for you. All right. I love you so much. So much. This topic was so important, and it's always going to be so important. I'm always going to be talking about it. Just be really, really, really compassionate with yourselves and every single person. Like, these times we're all moving through something. How can we drop into the hearts and, remember we're all human, and remember we're all making mistakes. And from that place of like, you know, I see your humanness. I see my humanness. And from that place, how can we co create a more beautiful future for ourselves? Even though if we don't want to relate to each other, just like kindness, we're spreading that kindness, spreading that heart frequency, that understanding, because ultimately we all want to be understood. We all want to be heard, right? Like, so really being that person that we want to actually run into in our entire lives. How can we be that for the world? I wish that we all become those versions of us. And along the way, we stumble and we fall and we make mistakes and we fuck up. But, like it's life. And being really compassionate with ourselves, nurturing ourselves in all the way. I love you so much. I will see you tomorrow with another topic. If you have any questions, please DM me and let's have a chat. Sending you so much love and blessings.